Hello and welcome to Material Girls, a pop culture podcast that uses critical theory to understand the zeitgeist. I'm Hannah McGregor.
And I'm Marcelle Cosman. And this week, we have our first ever Material Girls return guest, your favorite internet busybody and ours, Leena Norms, who you might remember from our Wonka episode last year. Welcome back, Leena.
I'm back like a bad smell. Lingering.
Whoa.
Lingering. You can't get rid of me.
For folks who are brand new, if this is their first Leena Norms guest episode of Material Girls, do you want to just let the listeners know, who are you? What are your internet busybody credentials?
Wow. So I have been making videos about books on the internet for 15 years. However, unfortunately, some of those books happen to be about the climate crisis. So then I had to start making video essays about the climate crisis.
Oh.
Then I read about fast fashion in the stupid books, and then I had to start making my own clothes. So it's really spiraled out of control. And what I really want to do is just sit down and read books. But unfortunately, the books keep educating me and I have to start making videos about other things. And then sadly, I then had to write some books about it as well. So I've actually started writing my own books as well. I have a poetry collection called Bargain Bin Rom-Com, and I have a not self-help book. I'm calling it slapdash self-help book called Half-Assed Human that's coming out soon as well.
Oh, I need that.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. Okay, we are here to talk about Wicked. Wicked, part 1. And to delve into its many, many intertexts. But surprise, surprise, we're not really going to talk about the content of the movie in this episode because, it's not really what we do. So I wanted to just give us an opportunity off the bat to say, hey, did you like Wicked Part 1? What'd you think? You have fun?
I will lead, and I don't know if I may be alone in this, as I am alone in most things. It's fine. I had a great time. I had a great time. And you know why? Yeah. Because I've been anticipating this. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I wrote my dissertation on it, and this film was supposed to come out in 2016. And then it was supposed to come out in 2019, and they released a poster for it, and then they backed out of it. And ever since, I've just been on the edge of my seat. It's almost like all the muscles that I didn't know I was tensing released when I realized that they hadn't fucked it up. So for me, it was a very relaxing watch, because as we know, with so many film adaptations, it could have been Cats, and it wasn't Cats. And for that, I'm grateful.
That's a real win. I'm so glad that, as a big fan of the book and somebody who felt like, perhaps a little bit of trepidation, that you were like, yes. What was your favorite part?
I cried at the part where Glinda and Elphaba did their little dance in the Ozdas ballroom.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Because they did it in a slightly different way from the stage, and I wasn't expecting it. And it's a scene that when I see it on stage, it just runs past me, and I'm like, yeah, get to the next song, come on. And because it was an unfamiliar, emotional moment for me, I did cry, because that's what I like when people adapt films and they point out things to the people who love it that they had been skimming over and taking for granted. So I'm sorry, that's my favorite bit.
Yeah.
How about you?
I don't think that I saw it in the right headspace.
That's fair.
I was jet lagged and actively in the middle of a very bad period. So I was in a lot of pain.
No movies while menstruating.
And to try to perk myself up, because we went to the VIP theater, I got a fishbowl margarita.
Ooh.
So I was bleeding heavily, jet lagged and margarita drunk.
And
it turned out that it wasn't the right combination.
That's fair.
And so since seeing it, I have been listening to the soundtrack a lot and really appreciating the vocal performances. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back and I'm going to see it again. And I'm going to give myself a chance to enjoy it as much as I think potentially I can. Because I feel really committed to enjoying this movie.
I respect that. You weren't bringing your best self.
I gotta give it a shot. It's the highest grossing Broadway adaptation of all time.
Already
within 10 days.
Wow.
I gotta give it another chance.
Okay, first off, I also loved it. I went in knowing that Wicked is a beloved Broadway musical and knowing that it is like a cult favorite novel, but having no experience with either of those things. And so I sort of went into it knowing that this was like a big deal for a lot of people, and I was kind of on the periphery of that. And I guzzled that Kool-Aid. Like the first 10 minutes of the movie, I was enchanted. Like I feel transformed. I have been watching video clips of the interviews with the cast members like late into the night.
Oh, good. That's research for this episode.
I took it very seriously. So right before we started recording, I mentioned that I bought a Wicked popcorn bucket the second time I went to see it, because I did go to intentionally, I went to see it twice before this recording. And I haven't felt this inside the zeitgeist. A little teaser there for our Patreon perk at the end. But I haven't felt this inside the zeitgeist, I think, in maybe since like the heyday of Harry Potter.
Huh.
Yeah. And it's tender.
I said something similar to my friend when we were comparing notes, that I said, I feel like I've got Hogwarts back.
Yeah. Oh
because
my God.
I lost Hogwarts
Yes.
to all of the awfulness. It doesn't feel like a cozy place to return to.
Yeah.
And I felt like I got an immersive, escapist world that felt very welcoming back. And I think that's nice.
Totally.
Instead, you can go to Shiz,
I can
which
go
is
to
more
Shiz
age appropriate for
instead.
us anyway.
I've graduated from Hogwarts and I'm now at university in Shiz. Yeah, it's great.
If 36-year-old Jonathan Bailey can be a student here, so can I.
Oh, I just got chills. Okay, Leena, you know the drill. Our first segment, Why This, Why Now, is where we ask the materialist question: what are or were the historical, ideological, and material conditions for our object of study to become zeitgeisty?
And I'm going to argue that we kind of need to triply locate Wicked Part 1, because we have to talk about the 1995 Gregory Maguire novel, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. And then we need to talk about the musical adaptation by Stephen Schwartz that premiered on Broadway in 2003 and like launched Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth into superstardom. And of course, we have to talk about the 2024 adaptation of the first act of the musical, directed by John Chu and starring Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. There's just one problem with doing that triple location, which is, while I did see the musical on stage in London, in fact, I have not read this book.
Shocking.
And I know, Marcelle, you have not read this book.
I have also not. I own it.
Lance, what have you
I've been
doing?
holding it. I've been holding it a lot lately and being like, should I read it?
I don't know. Do you think maybe somebody here has read this book?
Was I summoned and then I come out of a lamp like, hello?
Yeah.
So for anyone who is not initiated, Gregory Maguire's book is a prequel to The Wizard of Oz, but it is informed both by Maguire's love of the original book, but also of his love of the original film. And both of them informed his like retelling of The Wicked Witch of the West. And it is a framing, a kind of retelling of the evil person in a story's narrative and defending that, which at the time felt like very new. And I think that since that book and that film and the musical have come out, we have a lot of those, and almost we're maybe a little tired of those. But this feels like, at least in the popular imagination, this feels like one of the first ones that a lot of people of our generation encountered. So it feels like an original trope, even though maybe it's not. But I do think that people come to it and they're like, oh, another retelling of an evil person's backstory. And I'm like, you don't understand.
You don't
No, he came up with it.
This is the blueprint.
Yeah. So I think basically in the book, I can't go through everything in the book, but essentially Wicked Part 1, the movie, covers about 1/5 of the book. And part 2, about 1/5. And then I think part 2 will probably, I'd say for the musical, it covers maybe another 5th. But there's a lot, the whole thing spans her whole life. We spend the first 80 pages in Elphaba's childhood and all of the characters.
Whoa.
And all everything you get set up, characters you'll never meet in any of the musicals. And then it also follows like a big period of her life where she's like wandering the mountains of Oz with a ragtag bundle of friends. There's a part where she lives with Fiero's widow for a while, like because Fiero was already married. It spans a lot of things.
When he went to Shiz?
When he went to Shiz, he was married. He was married at 5 years old. It's a whole thing.
What?
I know. So yeah, so I have a video where I talk a little bit more about the intertextuality of like Maguire's world. But essentially what you need to know about the musical's relationships in Maguire's novel is that Stephen Schwartz, who wrote Wicked, heard about the book through a friend, and the friend did that drunken thing where they're like, I've read this book, I'll tell you the highlights, here's what happens. Stephen Schwartz takes that idea, is like, that's a great idea, sounds amazing, I'm just going to start writing the musical without reading the book.
Based on a drunk recap.
And it's a drunk recap, and it very much feels that way. He did eventually read the book, but what is important to know is that he just took the highlights from his drunk friend and started writing the musical. And I think that information makes everything make sense.
Oh, that's beautiful.
In the same way that Jesus Christ Superstar is very much not the Bible.
It's
like
a
that.
drunk retelling.
So yeah, I think that's a good overview of like what the Wicked book is, but it encompasses a lot of other things that aren't in the musical. And I've made peace with that. That's okay.
Probably a lot of people listening to this are already fans of yours, Leena, but in case people haven't seen it, the video that you made that is a summary of your undergraduate dissertation, in which you make a very complex and theoretically driven argument about the intertextual relationship between Wicked, the novel, and The Wizard of Oz, is a real blast. So if you want to like take a deep dive into intertextuality and like learn more about this book, strong recommend.
It's deeply silly, and I'm not entirely sure that it makes sense. But yeah, it's kind of about how Elphaba is both a character and a person in herself outside of the narrative. And like when we have more than one author writing about a universe, does that mean that the universe becomes detachable from the author, and how Elphaba might fit into that, essentially.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Silly.
It's really fun. Okay. What I find really interesting sort of in terms of the material history is that the novel wasn't really a huge success. Nowhere near on the scale of the musical or the movie. We're not talking like a Harry Potter adaptation situation where we already had a blockbuster book that was then made into a blockbuster movie. We had, I mean, Marcelle, you called it kind of a cult favorite, and I think that's probably an accurate description. Could you read this quote from a 2007 New York Times Magazine profile of Gregory Maguire?
Quote, although Wicked stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 26 weeks, it didn't arrive until 10 years after its publication. In one interview, Maguire joked that the musical was a $14 million advertising campaign for the book. In fact, when the novel was published in 1995, he gave a reading in Chicago for which 7 people showed up. Word of mouth eventually kicked in, and by the time the musical opened on Broadway in 2003, the book had sold 500,000 copies. End quote.
So, obviously 500,000 copies, nothing to sneeze at. That is over a decade. And the book, I don't think, could really be called zeitgeisty until the musical skyrocketed it to bestseller status. At this point, it's sold tens of millions of copies. In 2007, when this profile was written, they said there are over 3 million copies in print right now. And that was a long time ago and before this movie came out. Now there's a movie tie-in. We can assume we'll see another massive surge in sales. At this point, he's probably a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, you cracked the secret to making a living as an author. You just need your book to be adapted 10 years after you write it into a major musical. Anyway.
It's genius.
Oh boy. So I confess I'm still a noob. So like the musical, a much bigger deal than the book. How? Why? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think we can say that pretty confidently. It won 3 Tonys the year that it was first put up, and a Grammy for the original cast album. And, more significantly for a Broadway musical, it has like really proved to have staying power, right? It's been 21 years and it just continues to grow and break new records. It is, in fact, now the second highest grossing Broadway musical of all time. It overtook Phantom of the Opera in 2017 and is now second only to The Lion King. And another previous episode plug, if anyone wants to learn more about the rise of the mega musical, which Wicked certainly counts as, listen to our episode about Les Mis with Aaron Keefe. We talk all about the history of the mega musical.
Incredible. Okay, so now we're getting into the juicy intertext bits that I just adore. So the musical is an adaptation of the book, which is a prequel to both the original book and the original movie, not just one, but both. And now we have a screen adaptation of the musical. It's so many intertexts.
I think it's also worth noting here that whatever our feelings about it, Wicked Part 1 is also undeniably a success. It became the highest grossing screen adaptation of a Broadway musical ever in just 10 days from its release, which is huge. Critical response has been positive. There's even Oscar buzz. Like, this is a critically acclaimed and financially successful movie. And one thing that tells us is that as a film, for all of its intertextuality, it is managing to stand on its own as a work of art, because there's no way everybody seeing it has seen the musical or read the book.
Like me!
Like you!
I am living proof that you don't need to have seen the musical or read the book to enjoy this fine cinematic masterpiece.
Oh, and that makes it a successful adaptation, right? Because a successful adaptation stands on its own while still having a relationship to the material it's adapting. But it also opens questions about how to think about the relationship between these previous texts. So, L. Frank Baum's 1900 novel, the 1939 film, the 1995 novel, the 2003 musical, and Wicked Part 1. And then also how to think about the other texts circulating right now that are also shaping how people encounter this movie, including the film's undisclosed but undoubtedly significant marketing budget.
Oh, do you think?
Maybe slightly spenny. It sounds to me like you might be ramping up to some kind of theory there, Hannah. Am I right?
Oh, Leena, am I ever? This is The Theory We Need, the segment where we introduce some critical theory to help make sense of our topic. And today, I'm going to be drawing on a book called Show Sold Separately, Promos, Spoilers, and Other Media Paratexts by Jonathan Gray, professor of media and cultural studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
I've always thought of paratexts as a book thing more than a movie thing, I gotta say.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I found this book by Googling, has anybody written about like film paratexts, like paratexts but for film? And Jonathan Gray was like, me, I have. Here's a book.
He replied right away.
Yeah, for sure. That's how Google works. People just send you an email in response. So as you and I know, Marcelle, but perhaps the listeners do not. So the originator of the concept of the paratext, French literary theorist Gérard Genette, who I will not pronounce like that anymore, was writing about books. Can you two, sexy geniuses, give me some examples of the kind of bookish paratexts Genette was writing about?
Yes.
Leena.
Indexes and like forewords, author acknowledgements, stuff like that.
Yes!
What about covers? Blurbs?
For sure. Book covers, blurbs, yes.
Illustrations in the book.
Illustrations.
Font choice.
For sure.
What about the little ribbon that acts as a bookmark in the book? And what the color choice?
Yeah.
The color of the little ribbon. So everything you're talking about like happens in the container of the book.
Yes.
And that's a really important part of it. Genette thinks about paratexts as like the gateway into the text. So all of that material and discursive content that you encounter as you like make your way into the story, that's all paratext. He also talks about like promotional materials like outside of the book itself, right? Like posters.
A Heather's Picks shelf.
Yeah, the Heather's Picks shelf. He doesn't specifically talk about it.
Is Marcelle's popcorn bucket a paratext?
Is my popcorn bucket a paratext?
Is it?
You know what? You're anticipating what I'm going to ask next, which is, without having read Gray's work on media paratexts, I'd love for you to wildly speculate about some of the things that might constitute a film's paratext, like a promotional popcorn bucket, which 100% is a film paratext.
Yes.
What else?
Did you guys have those big, like the big Wicked movie posters with a little yellow brick road underneath and balloons that were like pink and white on one side and black and green on the other? And you could stand in front, you could stand on the yellow brick road in front of it, and you would be in between Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande's hands touching in the poster. Did you guys do that, or was that just me?
We don't have that, but then it might be just my small town cinema. I don't get the big budgets. I need to go to the big cities for my yellow brick road hit.
Yeah, but like a standee like that for sure.
Yeah, I need a picture. What about like TikTok sounds? You know, like people like clipping parts of the movie and then like making little dances and stuff.
Yes, 100%. Okay. In fact, Gray writes specifically about fan-made paratexts.
Oh,
that's cool.
And that being part of the whole category.
What about like interviews with the cast? Because like I said earlier, I have been like inhaling those like a big Wicked branded bucket of popcorn.
Yes, fully. Fabulous. You are both really onto something here. So Gray lists a huge range of paratexts, and I think one of the strengths of his work is that he doesn't attempt to constrain or over-define paratext. The book is 14 years old, and I think it's like it still feels very useful and up to date because he doesn't sort of locate it too specifically in the moment. He leans into the category's expansiveness and its explanatory power. So as an example of that, Leena, could I please ask you to read this excerpt?
Quote, "To choose to watch a movie, for instance, we may factor in any of the following: the actors, the production personnel, the quality of the previews, reviews, interviews, the poster, a marketing campaign, word of mouth, what cinema it is playing at or what channel it is on, or the material on which it is based, whether prequel, sequel, or adaptation. All of these are texts in their own right, often meticulously constructed by their producers in order to offer certain meaning and interpretations. Thus, in effect, it is these texts that create and manage our faith, and we consume them on our way to consuming the film itself." End quote. It's really interesting to see adaptation in there, like what the kind of adaptations are. Well, a lot to think about.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that really struck me when I was reading this and he put in, you know, the material on which it's based, I was like, oh, but isn't that intertext? And then that made me go like, wait a minute, what's the relationship between intertext and paratext? And Gray makes it really clear that paratexts are also intertexts. So an intertext is another text that shapes and informs our encounter with or interpretation of whatever text we're dealing with. So the distinction between them that he gestures towards is that paratexts are generally thought of as like subservient to the primary text, like they wouldn't stand on their own, right? Like that a book cover doesn't have full meaning on its own without the book that it is the cover of, whereas like Wicked, Maguire's novel, is a full text on its own. And then we've got the movie, which is a full text on its own. So yeah, so we could call the 1939 Wizard of Oz an intertext for Wicked Part 1, whereas a video of Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande talking about their experience filming is a paratext. But I think we can see pretty quickly how these distinctions start to blend into each other, right? That like people can actually watch the video of Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande without watching the movie. And maybe they'll never watch the movie. Maybe they're just really like watching celebrity interviews and that's a text on its own for them. So, you know, part of that blending is that inherent instability of paratext, especially in a new media landscape.
So we're talking here not about the book cover's relationship to the book specifically, but rather like a whole complex media ecosystem that we're all encountering in different ways.
100%.
We can't take it for granted, but like people might not have seen The Wizard of Oz. Because I think a lot of us encountered The Wizard of Oz when we were like watching TV at Christmas, and people are no longer just putting on the TV and waiting to see what appears.
You're right.
So we can't actually even take for granted that younger people will have seen The Wizard of Oz, or if they do, they might only be seeing it so that they can understand Wicked.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Of course.
And they've got no idea. And then it's just like basically then The Wizard of Oz becomes like extended promotional material.
The Wizard of Oz becomes a paratext to Wicked Part 1.
Yeah. And then the memes start to stand on their own because they'll just become like inherently part of everything. I'm scaring myself. I'm being sucked into a deep hole of existential dread. Oh no.
This is the delightful instability that emerges in a like non-hierarchically organized media ecosystem. So, you know, in a transmedia landscape like the one that we currently reside in, paratexts proliferate, and that proliferation poses a challenge to interpretation. Marcelle, I would like you to read this quote from Show Sold Separately, please.
Quote, given their extended presence, any filmic or televisual text and its cultural impact, value, and meaning cannot be adequately analyzed without taking into account the film or program's many proliferations. Each proliferation, after all, holds the potential to change the meaning of the text, even if only slightly. Trailers and reports from the set, for instance, may construct early frames through which would-be viewers might think of the text's genre, tone, and themes. Discussion sites might then reinforce such frames or otherwise challenge them, while video games, comics, and other narrative extensions render the story world a more immersive environment. In the process, such entities change the nature of the text's address, each proliferation either amplifying an aspect of the text through its mass circulation or adding something new and different to the text, end quote.
Yeah, you've got a movie, but you can't talk about this movie as though it like plunks down into people's lives out of nowhere. People are encountering movies through paratexts, and we need to be thinking about from what angle people are encountering movies and what is informing those encounters, because otherwise we're not really going to be able to understand the meaning of the text itself, because the paratexts create so much of the meaning. So one thing I've found really interesting in reading about the Wicked promotional campaign is how aware the marketing team was of the need for proliferation in an increasingly fragmented media landscape. I read this really fascinating interview with Universal Chief Marketing Officer Michael Moses in Variety, where he describes his approach as a response to the disappearance of monoculture. He says, quote, so you have to be everywhere. If you're chronically online, you probably saw everything. But there are so many people who aren't, and we needed to be wherever they were in their own consumer journeys, end quote. There's no one place we can reach everyone, so we're going to try to be everywhere. And that means we'll capture a lot of the, the slices of the pie, the demographic pie, and a very small number of people who are terminally online are going to see almost all of it.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're going to get like a lot of podcast conversations about how this is the most over-the-top media campaign a film has ever had. But most people are not encountering all of these paratexts. They're just seeing a few. So by extension, different viewers are entering into the experience of watching Wicked through a unique cluster of paratexts that inform their viewing in unique ways that in turn shape their understanding of the meaning of the film.
Exactly. So I have less investment in the film as an adaptation of the musical because I've never seen the musical. And Hannah, you and we've never read the novel. So Leena's encounter, in turn, with the movie is also totally different.
Yeah, and then mine is also like because I'm emotional about The Wizard of Oz itself as a film, because of my childhood,
yes,
which maybe other people aren't.
Exactly.
Yeah. You have pre-existing relationship to like Oz as an imagined space that is shared by a fandom, but is not universal and cannot be assumed.
Mm-hmm.
We end up like all watching the same movie, but all experiencing and understanding it in unique, but not disconnected ways. Because we watched the same movie, It's just we watch that movie in relation to really different sets of paratexts that shape the meaning in different ways. And that's the inherent instability of textual meaning that intertextuality and paratextuality invite us to consider.
I am kind of getting what you're saying. But like, I think that maybe I might benefit from an example or something.
Oh, I love an example.
I would love to give you an example. Okay. Did either of you encounter the small online drama around the fan-edited movie poster?
I did. And then I consumed several video essays on it because I am the chronically online people that you're talking about.
Oh my goodness. Tell me everything.
Love it. Okay. So essentially, the marketing team's poster for Wicked Part 1 intertextually alludes to the iconic Broadway poster. So the Broadway, like the poster for the musical, is an illustration, and it shows Glinda in profile whispering into the ear of Elphaba.
Yeah.
And Elphaba's facing forward. Most of her face is covered with her iconic black hat. There is the Broadway tie-in book cover that Leena is holding up right now. That is the poster in question. Okay. So the movie poster adapts that image for the fact that it is now a movie. So it makes a couple of key changes. It's not an illustration anymore. It's photography, right? Movie poster. We want to see images of the actors who are in the movie. And because we are seeing our two main actors, they've made their faces more visible. So we get a little bit more of Grande's face, her hands lower down so we can see more of her face. And Erivo's not covered by the hat sort of above her eyes. And she's like looking like barreling down the camera, looking straight at you out of the poster.
Okay, yes, this makes sense to me. In a musical, the cast might change from performance to performance, right? So even if you have two initial actors who skyrocket into icondom, their careers may take them elsewhere. So the musical poster might use an illustration, but a movie poster, especially if it's a celebrity-driven movie like Wicked, you want to see the actors' faces, so you feature those actors' faces. Okay, I'm with you. I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But that doesn't explain the drama.
No, we haven't gotten to the drama yet. So for some fans of the Broadway musical and that original iconic image, the original was perfect and the film version altered it too much.
It's like a perfect microcosm of everything. Like it's kind of like, whose is this anyway? Like whose book is this anyway? Whose film is this anyway? Is it the fans and how much they love that, or is it Cynthia's moment for her to show her face on it? It's a perfect illustration, and it confuses me a lot.
Yeah, because fan paratexts are a way of fans sort of taking some ownership over the authoring of the text's meaning. You know, because fandoms don't only consume paratexts, they also create them.
Yeah.
Some fans edited the movie poster to make it look more like the Broadway one, including a fan edit that circulated a lot that covered Erivo's eyes with her hat, like it is in the Broadway poster image. So that fan edit got back to Erivo, and she posted on Instagram about it. Leena, could you please read Erivo's Instagram caption for us?
Sure. Quote, "This is the wildest, most offensive thing I have seen. Equal to that awful AI of us fighting, equal to people posting the question, is your green? None of this is funny. None of it is cute. It degrades me. It degrades us. The original poster is an illustration. I am a real-life human being who chose to look right down the barrel of the camera to you, the viewer, because without words, we communicate with our eyes. Our poster is an homage, not an imitation. To edit my face and hide my eyes is to erase me, and that is just deeply hurtful." End quote.
So, Erivo posts this. In turn, that post spawns a bevy of articles and memes and videos. Some framing her response as an overreaction, some defending fan edits as a practice, some even speculating that Erivo's post, which was also reshared by director John Chu, was just another piece of the viral marketing campaign. What the vast majority of stories covering the poster debacle fail to mention is that the Broadway role of Elphaba was originated by a white woman and has consistently been played by white women.
Mm-hmm.
Erivo is only the second Black woman to play the role on a consistent basis, and has obviously, as is always the case when Black people are cast in roles that have historically been played largely by white people, like, she has encountered significant anti-Black racism since her casting was announced. So when we think about the politics of revising a poster to cover her face more, we have to consider the politics of her casting.
Absolutely. So we have to consider the actor themselves as a paratext.
100%. So the actor, their previous roles, their public persona, their publicity around the film itself, right? All of this shapes our experience of the text. So we can see that, like, reading the poster itself spawns a world of complex paratexts around it that are then in turn informed by a circulation of other texts. And the poster is just a paratext to the movie. So we've got these, like, expanding circles of the generation of and debate over filmic paratexts and how people want to even frame the meaning of this movie before we even get to the movie.
And it's also that the actors are consuming their own paratexts and then responding to them. And they're kind of an audience to all the other paratexts, even though they're part of creating one of the text. I think I'm getting it, but I'd like maybe one more example.
Well, that's too bad, because I'm going to make you listen to a thesis first.
Fine.
Final segment. In this one, we get to watch Hannah bring together the history of our objective study and our theoretical framework to articulate a thesis statement that we'll then get to bat around like little kitties with a mouse toy for a while.
Wicked Part 1 is a study in our contemporary cultural relationship to intertexts and paratexts. In part, that's because it's a adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation, haunted as much by Judy Garland and Kristen Chenoweth's performances as it is by L. Frank Baum and Gregory Maguire's novels. But it's also because of the film's outrageously far-reaching marketing campaign. Universal partnered with more than 400 corporate brands, from Starbucks to Lego to Target, flooding the market with pink and green products. Meanwhile, the film's stars, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, went on an all-out press tour, turning out look after look and bonkers interview after bonkers interview, flooding the internet with memes and reaction videos and other fan-made paratexts. This wild oversaturation of promotional material, what Universal Chief Marketing Officer Michael Moses describes as, quote, just short of obnoxious, is in part a response to the disappearance of monoculture. The fragmentation of audiences means that for a film to become a blockbuster, marketing must similarly fragment, becoming not only ubiquitous, but deeply variegated. But if, as media scholar Jonathan Gray argues, filmic paratexts make their own meaning that in turn reframes or even modifies the meaning of the text itself, then the unprecedented level of paratextual fragmentation surrounding Wicked Part 1 makes it not overdetermined, as we might assume from such a far-reaching promotional campaign, but deeply textually unstable. In this essay,
Okay. You've done the thesis, fine. Can I have my examples now, please? You promised.
Yes. Okay, I've suggested 2 more case studies that we might talk about together. And I certainly welcome if there are other examples that you folks would like to bring into the conversation. I welcome those. Are there any filmic paratexts that you would like to talk about?
Oh, okay. Have you seen the film Judy with Renee Zellweger?
No.
Which is about Judy Garland's life, but also about looking back at her in The Wizard of Oz and how she was mistreated by the thingies. And it all happens on the set of The Wizard of Oz. And then at the end, this all set 6 months before she dies. And since the end, like, her career is dried up and she's got a drug addiction. And she sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But she doesn't want to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow because she's only doing it because she's lost custody of her children and she's trying to get them back. She's ran out of money. She spent a lot of money on drugs. Is that a paratext?
I think that's an intertext.
It is 100%. I mean, it's an intertext and it becomes a paratext if it's part of your own encounter with the film, right? So Gray, for example, argues that like if a studio has made a particular movie and that studio gained a reputation, that previous movie becomes a paratext for subsequent movies that the studio makes. And so I think if we're thinking about Wicked Part 1 as a significant addition to the canon of Oz-based texts, which I think we have to, then we have to bring into it the indivisibility of Judy Garland from the cultural imagination around Oz and what Oz means to us. And as soon as we bring Judy Garland into the conversation, we bring in a conversation about like the treatment of women on film sets, about celebrity and the harm that it causes, about child actors. I think we could have a productive and interesting conversation about body politics and the conversations that are circulating right now about like Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande's distressing thinness. And, you know, the conversations we do and do not have about what happens to women when they are in the public eye.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like that all sort of tangles together and shapes, you know? So if you are watching this movie and part of the meaning you are getting from it is that you are thinking about Judy Garland and what you know about her, then yeah, it's there.
Yeah, because you see like the shadow of her in the Wicked Part 1 because you see the back, as they zoom in on Oz, you see the back of what would be Judy Garland's head as her and the Tin Man and everyone are walking towards Oz. And I was literally just sitting in the cinema thinking, Judy Garland, they did her dirty. And then I was like, no, focus on the film. But because they were introducing that imagery at me, I just started thinking about how sad Judy Garland's life was.
Oh my goodness.
And she's posed as like the good to the Wicked Witch is bad. Like in the musical, they're like, she did steal a dead woman's shoes and then kill her.
And then we discover that who she kills with her house has a disability.
Yeah, problematic.
Marcelle, what about you? What comes to mind when you think about Wicked Part 1 paratext?
What I want us to talk about is, I think, also a very lovely microcosm of my relationship to Wicked, which is I only know like a teeny little bit about it, but what I know about it, I love. So the meme that has taken over the internet of holding space for, I'm obsessed with it. And I can't quite explain why I'm obsessed with it. Like I saw a clip of the interview, but like the way that holding space for has like proliferated.
It's a clip from an interview that has gone viral. It's Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande being interviewed by Tracy Gilchrist, who asks Cynthia Erivo if she is aware that people have been holding space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity. And I think she misspeaks a little bit. Like, I think she's like trying to say that like people have been like posting these lyrics as a way to articulate how they're feeling in this current political moment. Like it's really resonating with people right now, like with Americans in the wake of the election. Like the lyrics to Defying Gravity are like doing useful work for people. But Cynthia Erivo's response is so genuine and immediate. She's like, I had no idea. I didn't know. And like becomes very obviously moved. And then Ariana Grande, to sort of comfort her, just reaches out and gently clasps her index finger. And there's something about the combination of holding space, right? The sort of like introduction of an extremely subculture-y sort of queer therapy speak phrase. The sort of deep, unironic sincerity of Cynthia Erivo's response and the unbelievably sapphic finger grab that has made this whole moment go like so viral. Marcelle, do you want to read this? Tracy Gilchrist was interviewed by the New York Times. I love the state of journalism.
That's going to be her legacy in the world now.
This is it. She is forever going to be holding space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity lady. But could you read her little sort of description of what happened here?
Yes, absolutely. Quote, they first started grazing fingers while I was talking to Ariana. That's Grande. I don't know if it ended up in the edited video, but in the raw footage, you can see me clock it. In my head, I'm thinking, please God, I am just a human lesbian. This is too much. The whole thing is ultimately high camp, right? Because camp is sincere. I was sincere in my question. Cynthia was sincere in her response. And I think when Ariana grabbed her finger, she was just trying to sincerely let her know that she was right there with her, end quote.
Yeah.
I just got chills just now, just reading that.
I love this reading. Like, I love Tracy Gilchrist coming back to her own viral moment and like doing a media analysis of it. And Leena, it points back to what you were saying. You know, this is like the prosumer in the sort of digital media environment, that we are equally creators and consumers of digital texts. And that we see, you know, somebody like does an interview about a movie, their interview becomes viral. Now that interview is a text, and now they can do an interview about the meaning of their interview, where they close read their own interview in a way that adds, like, describing it as high camp is actually a perfect explanation for the appeal of the entire Arrivo Grande press tour. Right? That it's like these unbelievably ostentatious costumes married with a deep, profound, unflinching sincerity is like perfect camp.
Like, these two actors love each other. Every interview that I have seen with any of the actors from this movie, my sister-in-law described this as a bunch of theater kids coming out of their musical performance and being bonded for life. And that's something that I feel like I've never seen in a press tour before.
I also love that. I think the online fan fiction world is going to absolutely adore this, because I cannot describe to you how many lesbian fan fiction things there are written about Elphaba and Glinda. Like, there's everything from pure beautiful romance to utter filth. It's all been on the internet for like 20 years, so they're all going to be, do you know what I mean? And I want to know if they know that too. Like, I want to know if they know the queer history of Elphaba and Glinda.
Yeah, Grande has specifically said that she reads Glinda as queer.
Yes,
right.
That's right. She describes her as, and I quote, a little bit in the closet.
Yeah.
And then Kristen Chenoweth replied to that and was like, yeah, exactly.
And, oh my God, Elphaba moves into her closet. She moves into her room that is full of rails, and she keeps trying to put clothing rails around. Wow.
She keeps trying to put her into the closet.
I missed that.
I know we're not here to talk about the content, but for me as a noob to this world, the part of the movie, Wicked Part 1, that I found literally the least believable, like the talking animals were more believable to me than the idea that this is supposed to end up being a love triangle with Fiyero. I was like, surely we can reimagine the lyrics to I'm Not That Girl to be about Elphaba not being the romantic partner of Galinda, because this cannot possibly be a song about how she's in love with Fiyero. This cannot be.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I do think Jonathan Bailey was a brilliant person to cast, because if you want to convince us that two lesbians are into a man, he is the man that will convince us of that.
He has chemistry with, like, the floor.
And he's outrageously pansexual in this movie. So, like, it really, you can see him. I feel like if they said, do you want to be in a threesome with us, he would be game. I feel like they're really cutting off possibilities here. But anyway, what I'm doing right now is writing fan fiction.
Keep writing. The ink is flowing.
I am holding space for it.
Thank you.
So
thank you so much.
That's good and right.
Okay, so we've talked about, you know, some paratexts that increase our anticipation for the movie, or that, you know, increase our fondness for it through the delightful queer campiness of the two lead actors. Are there any examples of paratexts that you avoid or that decreased your enjoyment? Like, what paratexts aren't for you, or what paratexts make you go like, no, too much, I don't want this?
Do you know what? For me, I had such a good first experience watching the film that not only am I scared to watch it again in case I go into analytical mode and then ruin my own bliss for myself, I'm also uninterested in watching other people's just straight reviews of the film because I don't know anybody's, because I'm so into it. I'm like, I don't think I care about anybody else's opinion of it. Do you know what I mean? In that same way, and I want to see people like explore the world and like discuss the themes, but I'm not sure if I want to hear. But do you know what? I'm really glad because I think a few months before release, I went into a weird teenage boy gatekeeping music space where I was like, I was here first.
Oh, interesting.
I know so much what everybody's talking about Wicked like they know it, and I don't. And I was like, where has this demon from inside me come? And I managed to exorcise him. And like I know now I'm just excited that everybody likes the thing that I've always liked, and I'm glad that there's more people in the club.
Oh, you like Wicked? Name your top 5 alphabets.
I bet you don't even know the Broadway lore and how they lost to Avenue Q at the first Tony Awards. Anyway, but I've expelled that person, that evil teenage boy self from me, and I don't want to go back into it. So I feel like I just want to stay in the Glee a lot of the time, and I'm sure I'll be ready to hear them later on, or maybe when both parts have come out. But I think another paratext that like the spectre of the paratext is part 2, and because it hasn't come out, I don't know if we can comment on whether this is a successful adaptation because we don't have the whole thing.
Yeah. To me, it felt similar. One of the things that in my numerous TikTok consumption of these like fan cuts of the interviews, the Ariana fans, and I can never remember how it's pronounced. It's like Arianators or something.
Arianator. I know what you mean.
Something. Anyway, there are a number of folks who just have these like clips of her that are essentially like everything she does in this film is perfect. And I love her performance so much, but the focus on the minutia where it's like, did you know that when she says "oh" in the musical number for Loathing, like that's off script, and they're just like, this is minutia that I am not interested in. I am not interested in like this actor is really good at acting.
It's giving people who are nitpicking the Taylor's version versus the original recording that I'm just like, I'm never going to be that deep into anything. Like I don't care that much. This is not Taylor's version.
That's so interesting too, because it's like it's different relationships to like how you want to engage with the text in question, right? That like, Leena, what seems to draw you is sort of, I mean, intertextuality, right? Expanding outward into the other pieces and thinking about how they relate to each other and how they're in conversation and sort of, reaching out to broaden the scope of where the movie sits in culture versus like getting in there with a magnifying glass and really being like, okay, but did you notice that at second 497, you see what the internet insists on calling Easter eggs, when in fact they are just narrative. It will kill me. One of the many, many hills I can't die on, but when people call foreshadowing Easter eggs, it makes me want to die. Here's 17 Easter eggs in Wicked Part 1 you won't have noticed. Fiyero is standing in a field of wheat. And I'm like, this is not.
I think that should be your next merch, is like a picture of some eggs and then just like, it's just narrative, babe. Like, it's just narrative.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
You know what? I have a question about Easter eggs. So I have a clarification question. Because one of the things that I have found very cute with respect to intertextuality is these videos where they're like, do you see this dance move? This reminds me of this dance move from the 1939 film or something like that. Is that an Easter egg?
Yeah, I've seen that.
I have no idea what what counts as an Easter egg. I think that's generally, I mean, I know where the term Easter egg comes from, which is like hidden clues and references in video games. Like it's video game parlance. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if like somebody making a video of Easter eggs would include that. as an Easter egg, but they might, because it's one of those things that's just like an interesting thing to notice in a text that is not part of the literal surface meaning. Seems to all sort of fall into the Easter egg category. But like that is a great example of intertext that like probably the choreographer watched and studied, you know, the 1939 film along with other things and is referencing it. And yeah, references, you know what? As I'm saying this out loud, I'm like, references are absolutely a thing that people are like, Easter egg. It's like, no, it's not. It's an intertext. Say it normal, like me. Intertext, a common word everybody uses. Put some respect on Derrida's name.
I have one paratext that I want to recommend that's very tenuous, but I just want to tell people that it exists because I love it. There's a podcast called No Place Like Home, and it's a crime drama about this time in 2005 when one of Judy Garland's original slippers from The Wizard of Oz was in a museum in Minnesota. Looks like the Museum of Oz in Minnesota, and it gets stolen and nobody can find it for like 20 years, and the FBI gets involved, and like it's a whole thing, and it's all about how America feels about their nostalgia and their heritage and who stole the ruby slippers and why. And it's gripping, and it's kind of everything to do with this and also nothing, but it is a paratext of like, there's no place like home, like they've stolen our home, like, which is our American nostalgia.
And also, fun fact, we are now both an intertext and a paratext for this movie.
Oh my God, we made it. We need to get badges.
Material Girls is a Witch Please production and is distributed by Acast. If you care to find us, look to the ohwitchplease.ca for our episodes, transcripts, and reading lists and merch. Plus, on our website, you can find out about our other shows, Gender Playground, a podcast about the joys of gender-affirming care for kids, and Making Worlds, a video podcast about sci-fi, fantasy, and the radical power of imagining otherwise.
Want to help us be popular? Subscribe to our excellent newsletter at ohwitchplease.substack.com and our even better Patreon at patreon.com/ohwitchplease. You can also find us on Instagram and Threads at ohwitchplease and on TikTok at ohwitchpleasepod. Leena, where can people find out more about your various and sundry exciting projects?
My nefarious activities on the internet. At Leena Norms, LEENANORMS on Instagram and YouTube is where I'm most active. And my big project at the moment is releasing Half-Ass Human, which I'm calling it's the only self-help book that will tell you to give up. And we go through half-ass style, half-ass home, half-ass career, and giving you permission in 2025 to take your foot off the gas, essentially. So you can order that anywhere. And if it's not available in your country, you can order it from Blackwell's. And it does free shipping anywhere in the world. So you can pretend that you live in England with me and you can buy the book.
Leena, will there be an audiobook?
There is an audiobook.
Or do you read it?
Do you read it?
Yeah, it took me 23 hours to record because I can't read aloud. So
I'm going to listen to that on audio because I want to hear you give me permission to give up.
Great. Perfect.
Yes, please.
Thanks as well to Auto Syndicate for the use of our theme song, Shopping Mall. And of course, thanks to the whole Witch Please Productions team, Dancing Munchkin, Gabby Iori, Friendly Talking Badger, Zoe Mix, Giant Animatronic Wizard Head, Malika Gumpankum, and our very own Good Witch of the Midwest, Hannah Rehack, aka Coach.
At the end of every episode, we will thank everyone who has joined our Patreon or boosted their tier to help make our work possible. Patreon support is the way we pay our incredible team. So when we say we would choose you to share one short day in the Emerald City, we really mean it. You make this show possible. Our enormous gratitude goes out to Beatriz, Lauren, Kate R, Marshall K, our Marshall, Alex, Kent, Marissa S, Wilma, and Lazy Oil Painter. Thank you so much.
We'll be back next episode to tackle a whole new piece of pop culture through a theoretical lens. But until then,
Later, alpha betas.